As you travel south from the small town of Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, you may look up towards the mountains at a large cylindrical object that stands tall and out of place above the trees. It is an odd object to see, standing out like a sore thumb upon the blue sky commanding the landscape below it. Maybe you went home and pulled a map out and saw the words Fire Tower written on the mountain. Or maybe you looked up Google Maps and saw no label at all. You may have asked an old local who may tell you about the old water tower that stands atop the mountain supplying water pressure. Amazingly, it seems like nobody knows exactly what this object truly is. This true modern mystery will inflame your curiosity as you rack your brain on what exactly this thing is. But the truth is even more unique than the best guess that most people can come up with. A truth about a secret Cold War presidential communication network designed to function during a nuclear war. A truth about a hidden underground designed to protect the United States executives in case Russia struck our homeland. A truth of a technology that was state-of-the-art at the time, but eventually was made obsolete as the space race led to modern technology that we now take for granted. What is this statue of old, you may ask? It is codenamed Cannonball. Hello? So we're on an old road here. This is an access road leading up to the tower on top of the mountain. We got special access because this is privately owned, and we got special access to be here. As you will see here in a few seconds, the owner actually told us that we probably should bring some tools with us just in case we need them because of downed trees on the road and stuff. So we brought chainsaw, a cam hook, some other tools, walking sticks, etc. So this access road, which we'll be talking about in a minute, if you look at it, this thing is actually very old. It goes back, it was repaved back in the 1970s, and as you can tell, it's actually in pretty good shape, even though nobody has actually worked on it since the 1970s. So anyway, journeying with us, my dad's with us today, and because he's the one that got me access to this location, and we're going to head on up the mountain here on the access road and see what we can find.
Man, a lot of leaves washed out here.
Yeah. Guardrails rusted out. Pretty narrow.
They took their big water truck up here.
Well, and rode in a little bit on them, but still. This is gonna be lovely. Trying not to scratch my truck up too much. Down tree. Well, I guess we're going to be cutting stuff.
The trees are always small up here for some reason.
They are small. That's weird. It's real thin, like they haven't been here in a while.
Yeah, but there's not that much underbrush. There's a few huckleberries, and that's about it.
Yeah.
There's the old Tyler. It's pretty rough looking.
So at the end of World War II, the world was presented with a new technology of destruction that no one ever would have dreamed was possible until the 20th century, and that was the atomic bomb. Suddenly, men had the ability to reduce a large population of people to dust in less than 1 second. Worse yet, people with little regard for human life got their hands on this technology and threatened the world with nuclear war. Not only could this destructive technology threaten large cities, it threatened entire governments. Traditionally, governments of countries were found in generally one area or a city, such as Moscow or London or Washington, D.C. If these governing centers were threatened, the government could quickly remove themselves from that site until the threat was over or averted. But with the atomic bomb, however, timing was an issue, so governments needed to design a way to preserve the government in case of a nuclear attack. Many governments took on the reinforced bunker as a protector of their power. At the beginning of the Cold War, bunkers were built in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. These bunkers were used to protect military, executive, and legislative parts of our government at given times in case Washington, D.C. was struck by a nuclear bomb. These assets were spread out and separate for strategic purposes, but to run the government in potentially a war from underground, the government needed a way to communicate across the vast distances between these bunkers. Without the modern technologies of satellites or fiber optics of today, the government of the 1950s and 1960s America came up with the Presidential Emergency Support Facility Microwave Network. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the United States government began constructing towers and stations in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. in conjunction with underground complexes, bunkers, and facilities that were associated with the protection of the American government during the Cold War. These towers and stations were designed to be within visual distance or line of sight to each other, so communication was facilitated through microwave dishes. To do this, many of these towers were very tall, and they were built on tall hills or mountains. There were 8 main sites in this network, and all of them had code names, and all of them beginning with C's. Cactus was at Camp David in Maryland. Cowpuncher was in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Cartwheel in Washington, D.C., with a line-of-sight relay site near Frederick, Maryland. Crystal in Mount Weather, Virginia. Creed at Site R in Blue Ridge Summit, Pennsylvania. Corkscrew in Boonesboro, Maryland. Crown at the White House in Washington, D.C. And finally, Cannonball, standing on top of Cross Mountain in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania. This network was designed to provide reliable communication for the President of the United States from various relocation facilities and the White House. The towers and facilities were designed to withstand a nuclear attack and to allow the president to communicate among or from these facilities and to address the American people. In fact, many of these sites were directly associated with some sort of underground facility, such as Creed, Cactus, Cartwheel, Crown, Corkscrew, and Crystal. Only Cowpuncher and Cannonball on this network were not directly associated with an underground facility, though Cannonball had an underground communication cable to the AT&T site that still exists not that far away from this tower, located here on Cross Mountain. And actually the AT&T site, I believe, is in that direction. Using the sophisticated communication equipment and microwave dishes, these towers could communicate instantly between the various facilities and outward to the country and to the world. These communication towers were within line of sight to various other towers, and if they needed to communicate to a different facility that they did not have a line of sight of, they could route that message through another tower that did have a line of sight to that particular facility that they were trying to communicate to. For example, Cannonball had direct line of sight with Cactus, Cowpuncher, and Corkscrew. If Cactus, which is at Camp David, needed to communicate to Crystal, Cactus did not have direct line of sight with that facility. So Cactus would route their message through Cannonball, which would route it to Cowpuncher. Cowpuncher then had a direct line of sight to Crystal, so they could route the message to Crystal from the Cactus Tower at Camp David. Cannonball was built sometime around 1962 on top of Cross Mountain near Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, which is of course where I'm standing at today. This is the Cannonball Tower, or codename Cannonball site. It is approximately 103 feet tall and 25 feet in diameter, outside diameter. The walls are 15 inches thick reinforced concrete. So this is 15 inches thick, and if you look over here, somebody beat a hole in the wall, and it has the rebar right here where they were welded at, and then they built the tower around the rebar and poured the concrete. At the top of the tower is a 2-level antenna deck that contains space for mounting parabolic microwave antennas, or dishes, that were 6 feet in diameter each. This 2-level deck was covered with circular plexiglass panels around the outside of the tower. These plexiglass panels were painted with a special paint that mimicked the color of concrete, so onlookers could not tell the difference between the plexiglass and the concrete walls, making the tower appear to be a straight cylinder. This also prevented people from seeing the dishes to cover up the tower's identity, and also to prevent people from seeing where those dishes were pointed. The plexiglass allowed for the microwave signals and the radio waves to pass through, where concrete would block those signals. So that's the purpose of the plexiglass. To access the inside of the tower, you had to go through a heavily reinforced blast door. And that blast door was about 12 inches thick and designed to sustain a nuclear blast. Unfortunately, when they closed this in 1970, shortly afterwards, somebody stole the door. Now imagine the effort it would take to steal a 12-inch thick blast door. But somebody did it, and it was actually recorded in the 1980s that from the government that they had problems with people entering the place because the blast door was gone. And even though they welded it shut, the blast door disappeared so people could get into the tower. And this is, if you look here, you can probably see the hinges where that blast door would have hung, and it would have been mounted on the outside here. Now, the current owner actually welded a piece of plate steel to this to prevent people from getting in here because of liability issues. Again, this is private property, and nobody's allowed here without specific permission from the private owner, and especially not in the tower because of the issues associated with dangers inside. Inside the door was a foyer in which you could enter a decontamination chamber. On the left and then an electric elevator was straight in front of you when you walked in. There's access to an emergency ladder up the tower, and then also access to the basement area below this. The decon chamber was to decontaminate workers from radiation before they entered the facility. It contained a shower, a dressing room, and supplies for testing for radiation. The first floor also contained supplies such as gas masks and other equipment necessary to combat chemical, biological, or nuclear contaminants. The basement was where the HVAC system was, the air purification system, and the water system pump, and it was located here to run the facility itself. So Cannonball Tower consisted of 8 floors. The first floor we've already talked about, decontamination chamber, elevator, entrance, and etc., etc. The second floor was the workshop that stocked spare parts and tools needed to repair the tower or its communication equipment. The third floor was the administrative office with workspace for up to 4 people. The fourth floor was a secure cryptographic communication center where the secrets were kept. There was a steel door with a combination lock at the elevator entrance, so only authorized personnel could access this room. The fifth floor was the communication room in which the equipment used to decipher the signals coming in from the many microwave dishes and antennas at the top of the tower. This same equipment was used to broadcast information through the dishes and antennas as well. The sixth floor contained bunks and bedding for up to 12 people and was used as the living quarters to the men stationed at Cannonball. The seventh floor was the kitchen and dining area. It was where the food was stored and prepared, along with where the bathrooms and the showers were. The eighth floor also contained microwave equipment and contained the systems that communicated to the 3 other towers that Cannonball had direct communication with: Cactus, Cowpuncher, and Corkscrew. The elevator terminated at floor 8, and to reach the antenna deck you had to go up a ladder. The antenna deck set at the top of the tower, it contained a pressure hatch to the roof and a blast door to get to the outside catwalk that was enclosed by the plexiglass panels. So the facility itself did not just contain the tower. There was a site outside as well to operate the tower and to allow for transportation to and from the tower. So cut from the wooded area of the mountaintop here was a flat grassy area that was used as a helicopter landing site. And I believe that's where I'm standing at right now, is this grassy pad right here. The grassy landing pad was used to transport people, equipment, and supplies easily to and from the communication tower without using the access road or rousing suspicion of the locals below. In fact, Marine 1 and Army 1 would practice landing and takeoffs here at Cannonball. And this would lead to an incident in which one of these helicopters had to make an emergency landing because of a leak in the hydraulic lines on the aircraft. After calling for assistance and waiting for a maintenance crew to arrive from some other location, everyone in the chopper, including the people and also including the people serving in the tower, all came out here to help wipe the oil off of the aircraft because the pilot didn't want the paint job damaged on a presidential helicopter. And as you can see, hopefully the wind's not going to bother the sound to this, but as you can see, we're looking at the top of the tower here, and I told you about the catwalks and various things where you can see the catwalks from here, and then most of the plexiglass has come off and blown loose or whatever and fallen, and you can actually see bits of it laying around the yard here, which I'll show you here in a second. But there's only just a few bit of the plexiglass left still on the tower up there. And we'll walk over here because here's a piece of the plexiglass that blowed off, and I'll show you what it looks like. And as you can see, it's probably a good 1/2 inch thick, and it's rounded, and on this side it is painted with a special paint that makes it look like concrete, so it covers it up. But that is a piece of the plexiglass that housed the microwave antennas and dishes on the Cannonball tower. There was also a large radio antenna that set up here, and there was actually a story where a fella climbed it, and he went up it because he was dealing with a rattlesnake issue. But if you look here, this almost had to be where that antenna set, because there's an anchor right there. Now there should be at least 2 or 3 more of these anchors, but we can't find them here. But here's an old junction box of some sort, and that's the anchor for the antenna that probably would have sat right in there in comparison to the tower. So on the other side of the tower from where I was at, which here's the tower, okay? So turn around here, and you'll see my truck here. But right on the other side of the truck is this pad, and I believe this here was the garage. See, there was a garage here on the premises in which they used to store and work on the snowplow truck, and also the water truck. The plow truck was used to, of course, plow the access road, so the men who was working up here had access to the tower. And then the water truck was used to haul water to the facility and fill an 8,000-gallon water tank located on the premises. The water truck coming and going is why some locals thought that the tower was actually some sort of water tower. And then also they had an emergency electrical generator, power transformers, and a fuel tank to run the generator in case of an emergency. And I imagine that's probably what's set in this hole right here. But that's what these locations for the electrical generators to power the tower when it was didn't have access to any electricity, in case of a nuclear war, of course. So in 1969, the government decided to add shock mounts for the tower. The floors were replaced with I-beam platforms, and they hung from the ceiling on large springs. These springs allowed for the floor to sway to protect the sensitive equipment located in the tower in case of a large blast that would rock the ground and, of course, shake the tower. The shock mount project took 6 months to complete. The government then repaved the access road to then close the facility in June of 1970. The modifications were described by a former worker at this facility as a pure waste of time and resources. With the advent of space travel and the arrival of new technology created from the space race, communication satellites were being launched into space, and communication systems were being advanced. No longer did technology require direct line of sight to communicate between locations, for it became easier to bounce signals from floating dishes in space and back down to receivers anywhere within line of sight of that satellite. This technology made the Presidential Emergency Support Facility Microwave Network obsolete. With the rise of new technology, the monolith that once was codenamed Cannonball was deserted and fell into disrepair. Vandals stole, defaced, and destroyed parts of the tower over the years, but yet the structure still stands tall. In 1988, a report was written to the government to support the removal of the tower for safety reasons. But the government that wasted money on revamping the obsolete facility would not put money up to remove the structure. So to this day, the monolith still stands sentry over an area cradled in the mountains known as the Devil's Punch Bowl here in southwestern corner of Franklin County, Pennsylvania, as a shell of its former self, housing nothing but a roost for buzzards. As long as humankind doesn't force its destruction, the tower will endure. Being built to withstand a nuclear blast, the tower will be formidable against age and weather, just as well as its 2,000-year-old concrete cousin, the Roman Colosseum, which still stands today after 2 millennia of age. The tower stands firm over the countryside that it once helped protect and inform, just in case of the possibility of a Russian-American nuclear war. I would like to thank Mr. Bill Ernst for allowing us access to this area up here. for it is indeed in private land. I just want to make sure everybody knows that, and I've reassured that everybody knows that, because nobody's allowed up here unless you have permission. And just make sure you know the public is not allowed on this property without specific permission, of course, from the owners. And it's also can be dangerous, because as I walk around here, there's plexiglass laying everywhere, and if you get a gust of wind and blows a piece of plexiglass off, someone could get killed, because it's half-inch plexiglass. It's heavy, especially falling as far as it would. So anyway, that's this is Codename Cannonball, the site on the mountain here. And if you like what you see, give me a like. If you want to see more, subscribe to the channel. Till next time.